Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping back, way back, about 77.5 million years.
Yeah, destination Alberta, Canada.
Exactly, to explore a really interesting dinosaur, Albertaceratops.
Hmm.
We've got the original scientific paper, the one
Yeah.
describing its discovery, plus some background info.
And our goal, really, is to unpack what makes this particular horned dinosaur such a cool evolutionary puzzle.
Yeah, because horned dinosaurs, they're icons, right? But Albertaceratops seems to offer something, well, a bit different, a unique look into their history.
Absolutely. The really captivating thing about Albertaceratops is that it doesn't just slot neatly into the usual boxes we have for horned dinosaurs.
Okay.
It's almost like it's borrowing features from, different branches of the family tree,
Mm.
which makes us think again about how these groups actually evolved and split off.
Right. So let's get to know Albertaceratops itself. The name seems pretty obvious, Alberta hornface.
Yep, straight to the point. Honors its Canadian roots.
And the time period, late Cretaceous, you said. The Oldman Formation.
That's it. Around 77.5 million years ago, this place, the Oldman Formation, it was apparently buzzing with all sorts of dinosaurs back then.
And Albertaceratops was one of the big plant eaters on the scene.
A significant one, yeah. And how we know about it primarily is from this really fantastic find back in August 2001.
What was that?
An almost totally complete skull. Specimen TMP, 0.2001.26.1. That's the holotype, the benchmark for the species.
Wow, a whole skull. That's amazing.
It really is. And alongside that, there have been other bits found, skull fragments,
Mhm.
some postcranial stuff, bits of the skeleton. Helps fill out the picture.
And it wasn't exactly small, was it?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Estimates put it around 5.8 meters long. That's about 19 feet.
19 feet. That's pretty big.
And heavy, too. Probably around 3,500 kilograms, so like 7,700 pounds. A serious herbivore.
Definitely would have been noticeable wandering around.
For sure. But, okay, the really distinct thing, the thing that makes paleontologists go, is its weird mix of features.
Okay, lay it on us.
Right. So it had these long brow horns, the horns over the eyes.
Yeah, like on Triceratops, those big, impressive ones.
Exactly. And those long brow horns are usually a signature feature of a group called the Chasmosaurinae. Triceratops is a classic chasmosaurine.
But Albertaceratops isn't a chasmosaurine, is it? I thought you said it didn't fit neatly.
Precisely. That's the puzzle.
Mm.
It's got these chasmosaurine-like long brow horns, but the rest of its skull, the overall structure,
A morphology.
yeah, the skull morphology lines up much better with the other main group, the Centrosaurinae.
And centrosaurines normally have.
Generally, they have much shorter brow horns, sometimes almost none. Think Centrosaurus itself or Styracosaurus, they have big nose horns or elaborate frills, but not usually those long brow horns.
Huh. So it's got the horns of one group but the face of another, simplifying things a bit?
That's a good way to put it. This mismatch, this combination, is why it's such an important fossil. It kind of suggests that maybe the dividing lines between these two groups weren't so hard and fast, especially earlier on.
Interesting. Like maybe some evolutionary experimentation was happening.
Could be. Or maybe features like long brow horns evolved more than once, convergent evolution. Or maybe there was still some mixing between the early lineages. It forces us to be less rigid in our thinking.
Okay, so a unique blend. What else was going on with its head? Any other standout features?
Well, yeah, instead of a big tall horn on its nose like many centrosaurines, it had more of a bony ridge over the
A
nose.
ridge, not a horn.
Got it. And the frill, the big shield at the back of the skull, Albertaceratops had two pretty large hooks sticking out sideways from the top edge of the frill.
Hooks, like pointing outwards.
Yeah, outwardly projecting hooks. Quite distinctive. Really adds to its unique look.
Are those hooks something we see elsewhere, or are they unique to Albertaceratops? Any ideas what they were for? Display, maybe?
That's a good question. Similar structures pop up in some other early centrosaurines, but these seem quite pronounced in Albertaceratops. Display is definitely a strong possibility, or maybe species recognition, or even some kind of combat or defense, though display seems more likely for frill ornamentation.
Fascinating. Okay, let's talk about the name again. Albertaceratops nesmoi. You mentioned the location, but what about the nesmoi part?
Right, the species name, Nesmoi. That's a tribute. It honors Cecil Nesmo.
Who was?
He was a rancher from Manyberries, Alberta, and Manyberries is tiny, like fewer than 100 people live there.
Wow, really small.
Yeah, so it really emphasizes that local connection. Apparently, Mr. Nesmo was a great help to fossil hunters working in the area over the years.
That's fantastic. A nice reminder that these big scientific discoveries often rely on cooperation with local people.
Absolutely. People on the ground, people who know the land, their help is often crucial.
Great detail. Okay, so we have this unique dinosaur from Alberta, named partly after a helpful local rancher. When it was first described, with this weird mix of features, where did scientists think it fit in the big dinosaur family tree?
Well, the initial analysis, the main one by Michael Ryan back in 2007 when he named it,
Yeah.
his phylogenetic work suggested Albertaceratops was the most basal centrosaurine known at the time.
Basal, okay, meaning like an early branch, close to the root of that part of the tree.
Exactly. It means it branched off earlier than the others in that centrosaurine group, sort of like an early version, representing a form closer to the common ancestor of all the later centrosaurines.
So if it was the most basal, what did that imply back then? Did it like show the order features evolved?
Potentially, yeah. Its position suggested that maybe the common ancestor of centrosaurines had long brow horns, and then later members lost them, or developed other features more prominently, like big nose horns. It gave a potential snapshot of the early stages of centrosaurine evolution.
Interesting. So it could tell us which traits came first. Now, I remember reading something about some confusion. Another dinosaur, Medusaceratops.
Ah, right. Yes, that's an important clarification. So after Albertaceratops was named, there were some reports of other fossils, thought to be Albertaceratops, found down south in Montana,
Okay.
in the Judith River Formation there. Now, geologically, the Judith River Formation is basically the same age as the Oldman Formation in Alberta. Same time slice, roughly 77.5 million years ago.
So same neighborhood, time-wise.
Pretty much. But when paleontologists looked closer at those Montana fossils,
They weren't Albertaceratops.
exactly, turned out they belonged to a different, distinct genus of centrosaurine. They eventually named it Medusaceratops.
Medusa, like the Gorgon, because of the frill, maybe?
Presumably, yeah, that has some pretty wild snake-like hooks on its frill. So the key takeaway is Albertaceratops and the Medusaceratops were contemporaries, living around the same time in nearby areas, but they were definitely different dinosaurs.
Gotcha. A case of mistaken identity, easily done with fragmentary fossils sometimes, I guess, shows how careful the science has to be.
Absolutely. It takes meticulous work.
So with Medusaceratops identified as separate, has the thinking on Albertaceratops' position changed since that initial 2007 analysis?
It has been refined, yes. There was a more recent study, Chiba and colleagues in 2017, that presented an updated cladogram. That's the evolutionary tree diagram.
And what did that show?
Well, they did a thorough reevaluation, including Medusaceratops, which helped solidify the differences. Their analysis still places Albertaceratops pretty early among centrosaurines, but maybe not the most basal. It groups it near other early forms like Diabloceratops and Macaroceratops.
Okay.
And interestingly, their tree suggests Albertaceratops might be closely related to, or perhaps ancestral to, a specific group called the Ceratopsini.
Which includes?
Ceratopsians, which is famous for having bull-like brow horns and a relatively simple frill.
So still a really early important player in the centrosaurine story, even if not the absolute first branch.
Definitely. Its position, even in these newer analyses, is still quite near the base. It highlights that it represents an early stage of centrosaurine evolution, maybe showing off some traits like those long brow horns that became less common or were modified later in the group.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up then. We've been diving into Albertaceratops. It's a horned dinosaur, a centrosaurine from the late Cretaceous of Alberta, Canada.
About 77.5 million years ago.
Right, roughly 19 feet long, pretty hefty, known mostly from an amazing complete skull.
And named in part after Cecil Nesmo, a local rancher.
And the big deal, the core puzzle, is that unique feature set.
Yeah, the long, chasmosaurine-like brow horns combined with an otherwise centrosaurine skull structure, plus that nose ridge and those outward-pointing frill hooks.
It doesn't fit the standard mold. And its position in the family tree, while maybe debated slightly over time, is definitely near the base of the Centrosaurinae branch.
Exactly. It really makes you pause and think about how these incredible animals evolved.
So, thinking about that bigger picture, this blend of features, its early position, what does Albertaceratops really tell us? What are the sort of the lingering questions?
Well, it really pushes us to think about the evolutionary pressures back then. Was Albertaceratops maybe a snapshot of a time when the blueprints for Casosaurine and Centrosaurine weren't quite finalized yet, a transitional phase?
A more fluid evolutionary landscape.
Perhaps. What environmental factors, what selection pressures might have favored having long brow horns on that particular body plan at that specific time? Why did that combo work then, seemingly?
And what might we find next?
That's always the exciting part. Could we find more complete skeletons? Or maybe related species that fill in the gaps? each new discovery could shift our understanding again. It really shows that figuring out dinosaur evolution is this ongoing process constantly being updated with new evidence.
So the provocative thought for you, the listener, might be, if Albertaceratops shows this unexpected mix of traits so early on, could it mean that the neat categories we often put dinosaurs into were much blurrier in reality, especially during periods of rapid diversification? What does that flexibility tell us about how evolution actually works?
Definitely something to chew on. It challenges us to look beyond simple labels.